r/AskReddit. What are some psychology experiments with interesting results? Mice were put on two sides of a wall with a door in. Only the right mouse could open the door. Slowly, they filled the left mouse's room with water, and eventually when right mouse saw them in danger, they opened the door. However, mice that had previously been on the left side and were now on the right, mice who had previously been wetted opened the door considerably faster because they knew how unpleasant it was to be in the other scenario. Basically, mice have empathy. This makes me happy. I wish more posts on this were about things like this. I want to know more. Empathy is consciousness simulating consciousness. When you are talking to someone through a medium, internet, real life, you are estimating their conscious state by recursively defining your own conscious state in their terms, in order to predict their future behavior. That's why mentally ill people are treated so poorly. It's hard to predict their behavior, thus dehumanizing them. Hedonic adaptation. Put simply, a person who had just won the lottery and another person who had just been paralyzed took a survey to measure their life contentment. Obviously it was high and low, respectively. However, they both took the same survey a year later, and both scored similarly. The point being that regardless what happens to you in life, good or bad, you will always adapt and spend most of your life feeling neutral. This is really interesting. I never thought about this. I guess you have completely new highs and lows under different circumstances. Yeah, it's just like when you're sick from the flu or whatever, you really wish you weren't sick. But then when you're not sick, it's not like you feel grateful for not being sick, you just feel neutral and don't really care. One time I participated in a paid research experiment. I was basically tricked into thinking I was drunk. I was placed in a room with two other people and we were instructed to drink vodka with cranberry juice over a period of time while we socialized. After we drank, I was placed in a room where I had to read some flashing words on a computer. I felt pretty drunk at this point. When the researcher came back into the room, he gave me my car keys and said I was never actually given alcohol. He briefly told me that, because I was anticipating drinking for this experiment, that my brain had tricked me into feeling the effects of being intoxicated. I immediately snapped out of it and was completely amazed at how I felt. I've done this to younger siblings and relatives that won't shut up about wanting to drink shots. We just rub a bit of alcohol around the rim of the shot glass and fill it with water. 3 deep and they'll start snoozing on the sofa within the hour. Wow, that's like a cross between the placebo effect and conformity. That is super interesting. Solomon Ash's experiment on conformity. He set up a test wherein he would show 3 lines of different lengths to 5 or 6 individuals, I forgot the exact number, who had to state which line was the longest of the 3. The thing is, only the last individual is the participant and the others are actors paid to answer in a specific manner. For the first few questions, they choose the correct answer, but later on they start choosing the wrong one. The participants are conflicted as to whether they will say the correct answer or conform to the wrong answer as to not be judged by others, or due to self-doubt of their own answers. In the end, most do conform. It's really interesting, since it shows how powerful conformity is in the face of doubt, up to a point that some even questioned their own sanity during the test. Another variation of the experiment also had interesting results. It had the same setup with 5 individuals, with the last person being the participant. However, this time some of the actors say the wrong answer, while one actor says the correct one. There was an increase in participants who would choose the correct answer and avoid conformity. It shows how much doubt one can have on oneself when alone, but be brought back to self-confidence when they find outside support. It is amazing. I did this experiment in my school as a high school thesis kind of thing, and the age difference affects the results. The older the kid, the quicker they decided to change their answer. I'd definitely be curious to see how this is represented in different age groups. I'd expect teenagers to be more likely to conform than elementary schoolers. At my age, I'd like to think I'd be removed after calling the others dumb, but then, I've read about the study before, so I'm not sure whether that'd be my natural response. Split brain studies. One example, by providing differing information to each hemisphere of the brain in split brain individuals, those with a severed corpus callosum, meaning there's no communication between the two hemispheres, they found that people would actually physically grab their own hand with their other hand if they saw it making a mistake. Basically each side of the brain controls one side of your body, and in split brain people you can actually make both sides display a disagreement with the other, which is insane if you think about it. There's another similar experiment where people with split brains have one eye able to see a picture and the other eye can't see it. Then they draw the picture with one hand. While they're drawing the picture, if you ask them, they have no idea what the image they're being shown is. It's like they can't see it, even though they can draw it. Also, if you give someone like this a fork and cover their left eye, they'll be able to tell you what you use it for, but not be able to recall what it's called. Then cover the other eye and they'll instantly be able to tell you that it's a fork, but will have no idea what you use it for. If you train a rat to press a lever for cocaine, and then put it in a box with only that lever, it will press that lever as much as you'll allow it. The rat will stop eating and drinking, and just do cocaine. If you train a rat to press a lever for cocaine, and then put it in an enriched environment, for example, other rats to play with, toys, place to explore, where it could still press the lever for cocaine, it may press the lever occasionally but not as frequently as its counterpart in the dull environment. These findings were a big deal in the behaviorism world because they put a lot of previous results into context and help explain the link between poverty and drug use. So drugs are okay in moderation, and when you're well employed? I know you're joking a bit, but the main takeaway is that personal connection can help people overcome or avoid addiction. Research on learned helplessness is fascinating. Researchers would put dogs into shuttle boxes, long cage-like structures, that the dog could move around in, and would shock the dog through the floor on one side of the box. The dog, at first, could easily escape the shock by moving to the other side of the box. Eventually, the researcher adds a wall, so the dog can't escape the shocks, it just sits there, being shocked without escape. Through this the dog learns helplessness over repeated trials and extended periods of time. Even when the wall is taken down, the dog won't walk to the other side and avoid the shocks anymore. It has become so used to the pain that it doesn't even try to escape when escape would be easy. This research has been used to explain certain aspects of human behavior, especially related to repeated experiences of abuse, addiction, and poverty. It takes a long time to get somebody out of this mindset, and is possibly one of the reasons why people get stuck in terrible situations. For everyone concerned about the dogs, this experiment was done in 1967. It's much more difficult to use animals in experiments like this, and this particular one would be considered unethical now. I don't know the name of it, but apparently two people become closer if they survive through something together. Not even actual surviving death scenarios, but anything that has you on your toes and heart racing, like a roller coaster. Got it. First date at Six Flags. This actually works. My psychology professor and his now wife's first date was at an amusement park because he was trying to take advantage of this phenomenon. The car crash experiment. It demonstrated that the way investigators word a question has an immediate effect on the subject's memory of an event. It was part of a suite of studies by Elizabeth Loftus, with various other co-researchers, that began to call in to question the veracity of eyewitness accounts. And this is why eyewitness testimony is one of the absolute worst and least reliable form of evidence in criminal court. Of course, it's treated the exact opposite. One time I saw a semi drive through a train crossing arm that was coming down on him. Watched it with my own eyes. Gave my statement to the public works guy less than 30 minutes later that indeed the light was green the entire time and he had no warning it was coming down. Pulled him our video footage and everything. The light was red. So red. For so long. But I remember it being green. Memory sucks and I'll never trust anyone's eyewitness testimony again. I can't even trust my own. The influence of the color red in sports. Judges were shown a video of a taekwondo match and awarded more points to the red competitor versus the blue competitor. When the colors were digitally reversed, judges awarded more points to the other, now red, competitor. Oh, yeah. Fun fact. They combat this bias with right-hand bias. Judges get 2 triggers to click to award each color a point, and the right trigger is blue, since it's been shown that people tend to apparently unconsciously favor their right. If you stare into a candlelit mirror for 10+ minutes you start to see hallucinations. What individuals see tends to vary, but they've used this as a test to simulate schizophrenia before, because some see monsters / deformities / general weird shit. I did a variation of it for a mate at uni and completely wimped out of it. After my face started not looking like my face anymore, I had a complete dissociation. I stopped looking and just waited out the time. Now I know what I'm doing tonight. There have been some experiments conducted, but the negativity effect / negativity bias is really sad to me. It basically says that negative things have a greater emotional and psychological toll on our health than positive / neutral things. So you got an A on a test, that's great. But you totally fail a test, and the world crumbles and it's a total disaster. 100 things can go right and work perfectly throughout the day, but it goes totally undetected in our minds. Then someone cuts us off in traffic, and we fume and rage. I learned about this theory almost 3 years ago, and think about it all the time. Reminds me to appreciate and notice the many little things in my day that do go right. It's not that psychopaths lack empathy, but rather, they have the manual settings. A specific region of the brain lights up when people experience empathy. For most people it's an automatic, subconscious response. But in a study where they showed emotional videos to psychopaths and none, while scanning their brains, psychopaths would only light that region of the brain when specifically asked to feel for the character, while the control participants would light up automatically. So, would it be possible to be some kind of benevolent psychopath, one who always or mostly chooses to empathize? I actually know someone like this. He can entirely control his empathy. He works in a children's burn unit and sees awful shit every day that would devastate a normal person. He explained his empathy was on a manual setting and that he does feel for his partner and a few friends, and he can act empathetic when needed. However, he could handle the brutal death of a child and whistle on his way out the door when he went home. This dude is using his lack of empathy to help kids that are hard to even look at for most people because he recognized and embraced his difference. He has been my friend for a decade and it's kinda like being friends with a beautiful nice iguana. It is not like being friends with a dog or a cat. Not a psychologist, but the one where given a choice between sitting down doing nothing and shocking oneself, people tend to choose the shock. Ergo, we would choose pain over boredom. Curiosity over boredom maybe? Which is a great allegory for the darker consequences of this experiment, self-harm. Many people can't understand why people self-harm, and I'm the same myself for the most part, but a simple experiment like this shows us how it can happen in a more extreme setting. Reconsolidation. When you retrieve memory from your long-term memory it is susceptible to being manipulated. This can lead to memories being totally changed from the source. This is why eyewitness accounts cannot be fully seen as true. This knowledge is also being used to help people with PTSD by changing the negative memories they have of their particular trauma. If people have the upper hand they will put others down to keep it. An experiment told a class of kids that having blue eyes meant you were smarter, achieved more, etc. All of a sudden kids with blue eyes formed their own groups. Things like bullying and exclusion of other eye colors started too. They repeated the experiment with different eye colors in different classes, all with the same results. The more interesting / terrifying thing was that halfway through, they swapped the experiment and told all of the kids that having brown eyes meant you were smarter. The flip in beliefs was immediate, as was the bullying. They tried the experiment again, giving the kids green or yellow collars, thus the difference was not even inherent. Bullying and exclusion began. Flip the superior and inferior group, the behavior inverted. Possibly the worst part was when the children started believing that they were in fact dumber for having brown eyes or a green collar. They began to internalize the belief, and they did so quickly. Not entirely sure it fits into the category, but the Rosenhan experiment. 13 people feigned mental illnesses to get into mental hospitals and all were admitted with different diagnoses. They then assumed their normal personalities, but to be released they all had to admit that they were mentally ill. There was a second part where a hospital challenged Rosenhan to send multiple fake patients to the hospital and they would rate their patients on a scale of whether they think they were faking. They identified many possible fakers, but Rosenhan in fact hadn't sent anyone. Subjects were tested for introvert versus extrovert personality types. Prediction was that when placed in a sensory deprivation chamber the introverts would be able to handle it easily, while the extroverts would not. Exactly the reverse was found. Introverts became agitated quickly and performed all manners of self-stimulation. Extroverts quickly went to sleep. What the findings showed was that it's introverts who are the sensation seekers, needing stimulation from the outside world. Extroverts create their own internal sensation and project that out to the world. Dunning-Kruger effect is one of my favorites. Basically, people with less expertise in a field will overestimate their abilities in the given field because they don't know enough to see the limits of their expertise. At the same time, experts tend to underestimate their abilities because they know too well what they don't know. I've heard this about intelligence as well. Stupid people won't know they are stupid and think they are smart, while smart people know how much it is they cannot do or know and think they are stupid. Kind of a funnily ironic concept.